NFL Draft Talk here. It is Wednesday, April 9th. Welcome, everybody. We are talking about one position that looks pretty awesome this year, one position that doesn't. Quarterbacks, tight ends looking pretty good. I am Adam Azer with Dave Richard, Jamie Eisenberg, and let's welcome back Chris Trapasso. We've already broken down some of these players, but we're going to do it again, and I know you're excited about this. You just released a 7-round mock draft. 7-round mock draft. Please check it out. Just Google Chris Trapasso mock draft. It's the first thing that comes up. But you're excited to get into this, and welcome back. We're excited to have you.
Hey, yeah, this is a great reprieve from talking only about mock drafts on a lot of radio spots and other interviews that I do, because I know that you guys want to dive into these players, specifically their traits, their NFL outlook, things like that. And I like that way more than just repeatedly talking about a mock draft that gets thrown out and then until the following week when I do another mock draft that then is the topic of conversation for a few days.
And I don't know about you, Jamie, but, you know, I spent the last few days watching these tight ends, and I mean, I have a fairly strong take about my favorite guy, maybe my top two. After that, I mean, I think it's really tough. I rely on guys like Chris to help me out, to sort it out. And then, of course, we're going to rely on the NFL draft and what the evaluators say and the landing spots and things like that. But I think it's kind of bunchy, Jamie.
Yeah, I would agree. And obviously, we appreciate Chris coming on to provide some more insight. There you go.
It goes against everything in my body, but Schaefer made me do it. Welcome back, Jamie. And wow, the Gators could have lost 5 games this tournament. Instead, they're national champions. How was your trip to San Antonio?
Trip was awesome. Obviously, the game, not the most aesthetically pleasing game, but we'll take it. It was just fantastic. First time that I was able to do something like this with my kids. So they enjoyed it, I think that made it even more memorable, obviously, to see their reaction. So it was just exciting all the way around. And, would have been disappointing to see them lose, but I feel bad for Houston. They played a great game. Refs certainly weren't a little bit too much involved on both sides. But in any event, for Gator Nation, it was fun to see us come out on top.
It was a great game. It was really cool. And we welcome you back. And I don't even care what you were. I was just trying to set you up for an answer so I could play.
I figured after that.
All right. You know what? I have one more. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey.
I got one more. One more song to play. It's the rockin' version. Happy birthday to. Does anybody know whose birthday it is? One of the prospects we're talking about today.
Oh, I know this.
Come on.
Yes, I know who it is. It's Loveland.
And tight end. Yeah. Could be a first-round pick. Yeah, happy birthday, Colston Loveland out of Michigan. Woo! 21 years old. And Chris, this is a pretty young tight end class. Colston Loveland's 21. Elijah Arroyo just turned 22 4 days ago. Harold Fannin Jr. is going to turn 21 in July. Terrence Ferguson turned 22 in February. Tyler Warren's the old man. It was said on the show a couple days ago that he's like 25, but he's actually turning 23 in May. He's not that old. But you like that about this class? Young players. Mason Taylor is going to turn 21 next month, too. I forgot to mention him. Young players still developing.
100%. I think it's gotten to the point post-COVID where just because collectively the last couple drafts, including this one, the group at large is older, that there's the thought, hey, it doesn't matter. Teams don't care. I think it still matters. I think when you are showing that you can produce at a high level at 18, 19, 20 in the NFL, it's kind of the pre-COVID thought that the younger players, they obviously just come with more upside. So yes, that is part of what's baked into what you mentioned at the beginning, this really deep and exciting tight end class.
All right, let's all do it here. So just someone comes up to you on the show. I know you. You talk about positions and tight ends and all. Tell me about the tight end position in 10 seconds. Dave, I'll let you start.
Like in the draft?
Yeah, this prospect class.
In the world of professional football, the tight end position. No, there's a lot of fun talent. Definitely some upside and players that can contribute to fantasy potentially for the next 4+ years.
Jamie, give me, I just saw you in San Antonio. You've been freaking out, but now tell me about tight ends.
Hopefully these guys will be better than Kyle Pitts.
Please.
Chris, give me 10 seconds on the tight end position.
two good top end talents in Ty Warren and Colston Loveland, and then a lot of, like you were saying, young depth that have a lot of promise to become quality pros in the next few years.
Okay, here's mine. OMG, Tyler Warren is one of the best players in the country. He should be an easy top 10 pick. I am obsessed with Tyler Warren. He's my new favorite player. Okay. Does anybody else? Chris, do you feel that way? How do you feel about Tyler Warren? And I just want to say this. I want to give you all the list of 100 catch tight ends. And True Media goes back to 2016. So the last 9 seasons. Here's the list of 100 catch tight ends. This past year, we had Harold Fannin Jr., who had 117 catches in 13 games. And we had Tyler Warren, who had 104 catches in 16 games. And that's the list. That's it.
I figured it wasn't that long of a list.
Yeah, Trey McBride had 90 a few years ago. But if you have 70 catches as a tight end, that's amazing. What Fannin and Warren did, now Warren did it in 16 games, I'll say that. Fannin in 13 games, 117 catches. Fannin was the first tight end to ever lead the country in catches and receiving yards. But yeah, Warren's probably going to be the first one selected. How do you feel about him? And I don't want to compare him to Brock Bowers, but just like, how do you feel about him, Chris?
I'm not quite as high on him from a traits perspective in terms of his ability to get open. But the reason that he caught over 100 passes, I thought, is just that Penn State and their coaches understood how freaky of an athlete he was. And a lot of the games in the Big Ten, and even as they went deep into the college football playoff, he looked like a varsity junior or senior playing against freshmen and sophomores, just hurdling guys, stiff arming, getting balls out of the backfield. They were using him as like a wildcat running back at times. So I think there's a little bit more rawness to his game than there was with Brock Bowers last year. But in terms of just being that man amongst boys, making contested catches, I think he is every bit a mid to maybe top 10 overall pick in this draft.
Dave Richard?
I agree. I love the physicality that he brings, and that's something that Brock Bowers brought a lot of when he came out of Georgia. And so that's where the comparison kind of is for me. I worry a little bit about just how many targets Warren will get. He's going to need that perfect situation that Bowers had with the Raiders last year, where he basically became the number one target getter within a month into the season. And if Warren doesn't get that, then he'll still be a good contributor. But I don't know if he can be like a top 3, top 5 type of fantasy tight end.
I just think he's a monster. You know, he the Wildcat stuff is so impressive. Obviously over 100 catches, but also 26 carries, 218 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. He was kind of a beast. Jamie, looking at Chris's mock, we have Tyler Warren to the Chargers at 13 and Colston Loveland to the Broncos at 20, who have Evan Ingram. So what do you think about that landing spot if for Warren going to the Chargers? That would be a trade, by the way. That would be a mock trade from Miami.
I mean, we've talked about this a lot, about what the Chargers would do at receiver. And I mean, I know I've said this, that it felt like they would be more inclined. This was free agency too, you know, to go after tight end as opposed to necessarily looking to significantly upgrade their receiving core, if not trying to do both. But, you know, when they make the move to get Tyler Conklin, that's not a long-term answer. That's a short-term answer. And if you look at Greg Roman's history and Jim Harbaugh's history, you know, having a playmaking tight end certainly makes a lot of sense. So I like that move a lot. You know, I think he would be an immediate playmaker, maybe not to the scenario that Dave posed, you know, Brock Bowers walking in and just being fed targets to that same level because of McConkey and, you know, even Mike Williams and Quinn Johnston. But, you know, obviously you can see the fit and the upside there if that's the case. In the Denver situation, you know, again, I think long-term that would be, you know, fun because Evan Ingram's in his early 30s and clearly was not brought in to be, you know, the length of the rest of his career, you know, to be a significant difference maker. So, you know, with what Denver is looking to do and add young playmakers, given their salary cap situation, then sure. Yeah, I could see that. You know, again, short term, it would suck, I think, for his fantasy value, but long term, you can grow with Bo Nix and be a nice addition there.
All right, let's get some tight end rankings here. Chris, I'll let you start. I'll ask Dave and Chris for some rankings. Jamie, if you have some, feel free. I know Dave's been doing a lot of scouting. Chris, obviously, is what you do all the time. So let's get some tight end rankings here. Give me your top 5 or 6 or whatever you want. Rock and roll.
Well, obviously, I have Tyler Warren at the start. Like I said, I'm not quite as high on him just from a 30,000-foot view if I'm just evaluating for every team in the draft. I'm not factoring in potential team fits, things like that. But everything that we talked about, I think, is exactly why he is the consensus number 1 tight end. I actually have Terrence Ferguson from Oregon as my tight end too. I love his yards after the catch ability. That jumped off the film for me, that the contact balance, the ability to just make defenders miss, even though he's not a crazy athlete. I don't think he's quite as athletic as he tested. 30 missed tackles on 134 catches at Oregon. That's a pretty big number, way higher than Colston Loveland's. So he's a really fun player that feels like will be a day 2 pick, but I think can outplay that draft position early on. I don't have my top 5 here with me. I thought we were just going to kind of run through specific
that's
guys.
fine. Yeah.
And then Harold Fannin, like we mentioned, he did everything that you want to do to be on the draft radar from the MAC. 53 missed tackles forced in his college career on like 180 catches at Bowling Green. He's kind of Isaiah Likely. I think he's a more explosive version of Isaiah Likely, contact balance through the roof. And then there's some guys later that we can get into that I think could be sleepers, that could be in that 3rd to 5th round range, who again can outplay their draft position and be good contributors early in their careers.
I don't think you said Colston Loveland.
I do not love Loveland.
Okay.
In that he reminds me a lot of Noah Fant. In that Noah Fant was a big time athlete. We really got sucked into how explosive he was at Iowa. Excuse me. And was not great after the catch in terms of yards after the catch skill, like tackle breaking. Colston Loveland only forced 8 missed tackles in his career at Michigan. And that to me, on 117 catches, 8 missed tackles forced is not high enough if he's going to be a 1st round pick. And like Noah Fant, he was not a great rebounder at Michigan, only a 40% contested catch win rate. So I think maybe if you think I'm crazy, there is a Trey McBride comparison where he was never this George Kittle after the catch at Colorado State and has become the highest paid tight end in the league. But I'm a little concerned about Loveland. The only thing that I really do like is that he's clearly fast on film. And like you mentioned at the outset here, he's very young. So I do think that there's a lot of upside to his profile.
Oh my gosh. Dude, I am so happy to hear someone say this because I watched a video. You can go on YouTube. It's Michigan tight end Colston Loveland, every 2024 target and touch. And I watched this for most of the tight ends that we're going to talk
Underwhelming, right?
I was very underwhelmed.
Well, I counted 1 contested catch for an entire season of targets in 2024. And maybe I missed 1 or 2. I don't know. But I texted Dan Schneier. I was like, I don't see any contested catches here. They ran a lot of plays designed for him, a lot of screens, a lot of plays where he's going across the formation, low A-dot stuff. But I also see him, this is tough because I didn't have the all-22. I see Loveland kind of like running NFL route, like just beating guys one-on-one more than the other guys that I watch. Like, he's good at that. You're right. He doesn't really do any. He's a string bean. I don't know how he weighed 240 pounds or whatever. He looks so slim to me, right? He doesn't really look like a tight end. So I'm not surprised that the physicality stuff, the breaking tackles, the contested catches isn't necessarily there. Is that kind of how you saw it, Chris?
Is this me or Dave? Oh, yeah. No, that's exactly what I saw that I actually wrote in my scouting report, that he's very narrow framed and he kind of looks like a big receiver. And coming from Michigan, being recruited by Jim Harbaugh, I think there's an idea that he's a great blocker just because of the program and how much they like to run the football, but he's not really that. So he doesn't give you that ability. I mean, obviously from a fantasy perspective, that's kind of irrelevant, but usually the blocking skills do get these tight ends on the field early in their careers. And yeah, that's why I'm a lot lower on Colston Loveland. And we can go back to the 2019 draft with Noah Fant. Everyone loved him because he ran in the, I think, 4.5 flat and was just crazy athlete, looked like a wide receiver. And he's been a solid player in the NFL, but never lived up to that 1st round hype because the things that we have grown to realize are so important at tight end, contested catchability, and especially yak, those are 2 areas in which I think he is way below being 1st round caliber.
Just to the point of the yak first of all, he didn't have a ton of, you mentioned this, Adam, like completions on throws of 10 plus. He didn't even have a lot of targets of 10 plus air yards, 15 plus air yards. And granted, a lot of tight ends don't generally get targeted 15 air yards down the field. So it goes without saying that this isn't like a huge shocker, but his yards after catch per reception was 3.6 or worse on those types of throws, 10 or more air yards downfield. And it was actually a little bit higher when it's 15 plus air yards versus 10. As a blocker, I think his fundamentals are actually great. I just don't know if the execution is good. There's plenty of examples of him getting ragdolled. You might expect him to get ragdolled by like a 300-pound defensive lineman, but not necessarily by linebackers. So maybe there's room for him to like add some bulk and to make him a little bit more physical and stronger, but that could bring down his speed. It's really going to be about fit. And I know that Chris isn't necessarily thinking about fit, but as a fantasy manager, I am. And if Loveland goes to a place where a team views him much more as a wide receiver than a blocking tight end, then yeah, of course we're going to love him for fantasy. That should mean a lot of targets. But if it's not that case, or if he goes to Denver, where in his first year there, he's going to be playing behind Evan Ingram, and it'll be, a year where he might get lucky to have 35 catches, then maybe we've got to wait that full year before we see the better side of Colson Loveland. But I'm with you. I'm not done watching film on him, but I've been pretty underwhelmed for a guy who seems to be the consensus number 2 tight end.
Yep.
Yeah. There was some talk at the owners' meetings that he's the best receiving tight end of the group.
Oh, yeah.
Right. That's the thing. Yeah, just line him up against a linebacker or something, and he kills these guys. I don't want to be too negative on Colson Loveland.
But how does he kill them, though? Like, he's catching the ball. He's good to run a short hitch and get a first down.
Yeah, right.
But then how often is he breaking a tackle and turning a 7-yard catch into a 35-yard play?
No. And the other guys are doing it, I think, right? Mm-hmm. So, all right, we'll come right in.
And a lot of other guys have more speed, so sure.
Well, speed, glad you mentioned that. We'll bring that up in a moment here on Fantasy Football Today. We'll be right back after this. Just real quick, as I want to ask you if you agree with this premise here. Colson Loveland, 6'6", 248 pounds. Elijah Arroyo, 6'5", 250 pounds. Completely different frames, right?
Yeah. I think Arroyo is actually a little bit broader in his shoulders, and like Dave was hinting at with Colson Loveland, that maybe he can add some weight to his lower half. I think Arroyo, kind of the same deal, but I think is a little more NFL ready frame wise right now. And maybe that makes sense because he's a little bit older than Colson Loveland, who, like you mentioned, his birthday today, he's one of the youngest prospects in the class.
Yeah, and Arroyo's already 22.
Yep.
Old man. We talked about speed going into the break. Have you noticed this is a pretty slow class? I mean, there's no outstanding 40 times. The fastest 40 time, Chris, at the combine, I think it was Ferguson and 4.63. 4.63. So, Pitts was like 4.4. Bowers was like 4.51. I think Pitts was 4.4. Yeah, it's slow class, at least on, in 40 times.
But I think anyway that there are a lot of tight ends that are more of the move tight end variety that can be those big pass catching types, and not necessarily, a blocking tight end or a tight end that can do it all. And that makes me a little bit more interested in this class, again, from the fantasy perspective.
From the speed angle, just quickly, I'm bummed that Dave's guy Elijah Arroyo wasn't able to work out pre-draft, and I don't think we got a 40 from Mason Taylor, who looks pretty fast on film. So
4.68 for Taylor.
What did he run?
I see him at 4.68.
Okay, 4.68. So
again, right around what Loveland could run.
Yeah, so it is a slower class, although I do think Arroyo could have maybe beaten that 4.63 because he looks really fluid and just effortlessly fast on film. But I guess what I would say is, yeah, the speed matters at tight end, but it feels like, and we've kind of touched on it already, the Terrence Fergusons, even Arroyo at times, obviously Harold Fannin, the yards after the catch ability is not coming from their speed. It's coming from their contact balance and their cutting skill, which I think this class at tight end has in spades, especially as you get down the board.
Mm-hmm. All right, so who do you guys think? Oh, Dave, you want to give me your rankings and just tell me, who do you guys think could be impact players, fantasy starters at the next level? Dave?
Well, mine will be much more geared toward fantasy, so maybe I can answer both questions with this ranking. It's in pencil, other than Warren at 1. He's number 1. That's in ink. I've got Arroyo 2nd, Loveland 3rd, Mason Taylor 4th, and Fannon's 5th. But it's definitely fluid. I haven't really dug into Gunnar Helm enough to know whether or not I think that he can end up being a decent fantasy tight end. And now I've got to give Ferguson a second look if Chris has him second. He did not really stand out at the Senior Bowl, but big dude who can move a little bit. So it's somebody that I need to double check
on. Jamie, have you any buzz on the tight ends? Anything you want to add?
Just the top 4 for me is the only ones I really looked at, and I just have Taylor ahead of Arroyo, but it's close. But Loveland is second behind Warren.
Ferguson was the last guy that I watched. I watched him this morning, and if you watch every target of his, I see it too. I really like him, but I don't know. I just feel like it's going to really depend on where these guys end up and how the NFL evaluates them. And I think it could go in any order. So we've talked I think Warren will be the first and Loveland will be the second, although I guess I've seen some mocks where that's flipped. And then after that, when you look at Arroyo, Fannin, who we haven't talked about yet, Mason Taylor, Terrence Ferguson, is that really the next 4? Is there another guy that belongs in this discussion, Chris?
I don't think so in terms of where these guys will be picked. There's a few others that I like. There's Josh Simon from South Carolina. He's older, so he kind of bucks the trend at this tight end class. He's already 24, but was really athletic at South Carolina. I don't know what was in the water there. Like everyone from that program tested through the roof at the combine. I also like Jalen Conyers from Texas Tech. He's another one that is kind of like Charles Clay-esque. Older, started at Arizona State there with the Herm Edwards situation, transferred to Texas Tech. Watch him on film. You will see, and he was like 260 at the combine, like 6'3", 260. Built kind of like, I don't want to say George Kittle because Kittle's kind of bulked up, but he kind of plays like Kittle in terms of his ability and tenacity as a blocker and after the catch. But who you outlined, Adam, is probably the next tier of tight ends, like from the round 3 to round 5, that in the right situation, like we're always talking about as a tight end 2 or 3 that ascends, could be a decent fantasy contributor early in their careers.
Jamie, do you think Fannin, so Harold Fannin Jr., who's the guy who set the record for catches, the only tight end ever lead the country in catches and receiving yards, out of Bowling Green, Mason Taylor out of LSU, Elijah Arroyo out of Miami, Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon. You think these guys could end up in the second round?
Oh, for sure. I mean, maybe not all of them, but I think you look at the way the position has changed and how teams are, not necessarily just offensively game planning to use them, how teams are defensively game planning to stop them. You've seen how the position has evolved, and from even just the last few years of where Pitts was drafted, where Bowers was drafted, what McBride's contract just, what he just got paid, how teams are investing in the position. Sure, I think with how the talented some of these guys are, again, it's not necessarily like so top heavy, but it's top heavy. And then once you start to get into that next tier, I think as Chris, sort of illustrated, it's a pretty good group. And so there's going to be some teams, especially with how many, teams have compensatory picks and are able to sort of take some swings. If these guys hit, they're difference makers, So like I said, I like Chris's, landing spot of Tyler Warren to the Chargers. They may not necessarily have to trade up to still get a guy that they like. Especially, knowing the Michigan history there for Loveland. So there's some potential ties in across the league where you could see some of these guys maybe getting, drafted. I don't want to say sooner than they should go, but again, just how the tight end position has evolved and how much these guys are so involved as pass catchers now. Like, sure, round 2 for maybe 2 or 3 of them.
So, Chris, last year we had Bowers go 13th overall. And then we had Ben Sinnott in the second round, Tip Ryman in the third round, Jatavian Sanders, Theo Johnson, and Eric All, and A.J. Barner, and Cade Stover, and Jared Wiley, all in the fourth round. If we look at Ben Sinnott, I think, Sinnott, Sanders, Theo Johnson, these were guys that we thought maybe could have an impact, maybe, as rookies. They had good skill sets. Are the top 6 tight ends, I mean, obviously, the first 2 will be, are the top 6 tight ends all better than the number 2 tight end off the board last year in Ben Sinnott?
I really liked Ben Sinnott, and I think, I mean, again, situation obviously matters, and how many targets he can get. I think he can be a quality player in his second season because the athleticism was absolutely there with him coming out of Kansas State. Yak ability that we've talked about, very reliable hands. So I don't know if I would put any of the from 3 through 7 to 8 like clearly ahead of Ben Sinnott. If someone loves Elijah Arroyo or the upside of Colston Loveland or maybe even Mason Taylor, I could see it. But I think Ben Sinnott, we can't totally say that just because he didn't break out right away as a rookie means that he's totally, going to be insignificant in the NFL.
And Dave, when you evaluate these guys, right, like you might like Elijah Arroyo more than Harold Fannin Jr. And I believe I mentioned this on Monday's show, but the best play to watch for Elijah Arroyo is him chasing down the Virginia Tech defensive back who intercepted Cam Ward. You will see speed. It's just like DK Metcalf, the DK Metcalf play, not the same speed, but the same concept. How can I possibly rank Elijah Arroyo, who had, I think, 46 catches in his career, ahead of Harold Fannin Jr., who had 117 catches last season? The thing about Fannin, we haven't mentioned this yet, Fannin is small, 6'3", 241 pounds. That is probably the problem here. But do you rank Arroyo ahead of Fannin? So what do you think about just the raw production argument there?
I don't like the raw production argument. You need to have context with these things. And Arroyo was a great pass catcher for Miami, but he was one of like 4 regular targets for Cam Ward. And there were other contributing wide receivers that were just like speed guys downfield that earned targets because of it. And Arroyo wasn't even the only tight end in the game. They had a bunch of other guys that would contribute there. So he played his role and he did what he could with it. I don't know what the situation was like for Fannin, but judging by the lack of Bowling Green prospects in the NFL draft, I'm going to guess that Fannin had a hammerlock on the target volume that he would get there. And so the guy that's going to get more targets is going to get better numbers, at least raw stats wise, on every single time. It's not a year-to-year basis. It's everywhere across the board.
What did Fannin run?
They
4.7, I think.
And so did Arroyo. I had Arroyo
I
had Arroyo at 4.69, and I had Fannin at 4.7.
Was Arroyo at his pro day?
It must have been. They did not run at the combine.
Yeah,
because if you're Fannin and you're that small for a tight end, you'd almost want to be a wide receiver, given what the contracts are at that position. Like,
yeah,
if he can make the switch and be successful there, like that's a better scenario for him. If he's gonna obviously struggle potentially that side.
Yeah, I think he's too. I don't think he could be a wide receiver, but not with 4.7 speed.
You're right, that's the problem.
But yeah, I mean, I think I kind of was a little bit lower on Arroyo just because, man, I mean, just 35 catches last year. I know we have to project, but Bowling Green was only 46th in the country in pass attempts, and he still had 117 catches. So that's incredible to me. What do you think about Fannin, Chris?
I really like him just from a yak perspective, which I don't want to just continue to say the same thing, but it's what I place maybe second to just separation ability in terms of evaluating tight ends, like Dave was referencing earlier, that you don't see with Colston Loveland's film, that 7-yard hitch that turns into a 35-yard gain that we've seen from the Travis Kelce's and the Mark Andrews and the George Kittles over the last decade. You see that littered all over Harold Fannin's film. Now we're talking about that he's a little smaller. He's not crazy fast. He did it as the kind of the Ty Warren of the Bowling Green offense. He's not going to get that volume in the NFL. So that's why I'm a little bit lower on him, because the traits, even though he had the crazy production, are not like, oh my God, this is Vernon Davis 2.0, but he can take those schemed open throws that we've seen have become a prominent, or I don't want to say prominent feature, but have become a feature of every NFL offense, and take that throw into the flat and turn it into a 15-yard gain, as well as any tight end in this class.
And that's the kind of thing that's going to draw in coaches. They'll see that and they'll say, all right, well, he played for Bowling Green. Can he do that against NFL pros. And if they think that he can, then that's what's going to get Fannin drafted.
Yep. Good point.
Over anything like whatever his 40 time was. I wanted to just a quick comparison on some metrics between Fannin and Arroyo. You mentioned that Arroyo had 35 catches and Fannin had 117. Fannin had a 39% target share. Arroyo had 14.2%.
Wow.
But on yards per catch, Arroyo 16.9, Fannin 13.3. Yards after catch per reception. Both these numbers are great, by the way. 8.9 for Arroyo, 7.5 for Fannin. By comparison, Loveland was at 5.2. Explosive play rate, 27.7% for Arroyo, 25.3% for Fannin. And again, just comparing to Loveland was at 13.4%. So I think you can just tell by these metrics that the two tight ends that aren't getting talked about as much as Loveland, we're getting the job done, at least on explosive basis, without necessarily one of them getting the volume that we wanted. If we're judging these guys based on their athleticism and project it for what they can do in the NFL, A, this is very good for fantasy, and B, if a team recognizes that, they'll draft these guys maybe a little bit sooner than we thought, and they'll apply them into their offenses as soon as they possibly can.
Now, I've looked at a lot of this in the NFL level and explosive play rate and what it means for tight ends. It is at both tight end and wide receiver. It is very much tied to ADOT. And I bring that up because Arroyo had a very high ADOT. He had the sixth highest ADOT among tight ends at 11.1 yards. And Arroyo led all tight ends in yards per catch. And he only had 35 catches, so that helps too. But when you talk about Loveland and Fannin having very different explosive play rates, Dave, I'm glad you brought this up. Fannin much better. They had very similar ADOTs.
They did.
7.1 for Loveland, 7.5 for Fannin. But I don't know any tight ends that are 6'3" that are good in the NFL, you know? It's tough. Like, I think Jordan is small, right?
Sure,
Jonnu Smith, maybe.
Jonnu Smith?
Which
I don't care
which
what he's
Fannin
listed
is kind of like Jonnu Smith on film. Sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
No, and I'm sorry for jumping in. I was going to say that if Fannin's going to be used exclusively as a wide receiver, and we're just going to call him a tight end, but he's running routes all over the place, he's basically Evan Ingram, then, you know, we can find matchups. A coach will say that we can find matchups for him to win.
Yeah. Jonnu Smith was a good call. It looks he's listed as 6'3".
But you're right. I mean, there aren't many who are 6'3" that are really good, but I'm thinking Isaiah Likely and Jonnu Smith is kind of just stylistic comparisons, and I'm not sure about the workouts, but the height, weight, length, all of that very similar to Harold Fannin.
Honestly, they haven't been that good. I mean, from a fantasy standpoint, they've had nice careers, but Jonnu Smith and Isaiah Likely have combined for one good fantasy season. Jamie,
any of these rookie tight ends would take Jonnu Smith's career right now.
Right, but we're from a fantasy standpoint here. I mean, let me get to the mock draft and get your thoughts here. So let's see. Arroyo, he has 106th overall to the Patriots. What do you think?
I mean, there's a log jam there, so his rookie season would be a little bit, probably of a struggle, knowing that they bring back Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper. But again, long term, this is somebody that can grow with a young quarterback.
Oh man, Chris Trapasso has killed Mason Taylor's fantasy value. He has mocked him 45th overall to the Colts.
I feel like they need a tight end. They need it.
Yeah,
they do.
You're I guess hopeful that Anthony Richardson's the long-term quarterback there. If he's not, then could be fantastic.
Yeah. Who else? Ferguson. He's got 84th overall to the Bucks.
Again, logjam of targets, or logjam to get targets. We'll see. I don't know if I love that one the most.
That's a sneaky one. Tampa's a sneaky team to draft a tight end. Otten's in a contract year.
Oh, I kind of like this one. I don't know about this year, but I like it for 2026 and beyond. Harold Fannin Jr., 78th overall, trading up the Rams. Get Harold Fannin Jr., Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a coach will find a way to get guys open and use any sort of mismatch he could find. And knowing that, Puka's retiring at 30, so we only got 6 more years of him. And Devontae Adams is on his way out the door. So I do like that fit. Yes, that's a good call.
All right, let's take a break and talk about quarterbacks when we come back on Fantasy Football Today.
We dig it. Do you? the Pro Volleyball Federation on CBS Sports Network.
We're back with Chris Trapasso, Dave Richard, Jamie Eisenberg. I'm Adam Azer. Giving your name in the middle of the podcast is a weird thing to do when you're like on YouTube, and it's just like, it's very strange. Plus, I'm on every show. Anyway, let's rank the quarterback prospects here. Chris, even if you don't have your rankings in front of us, just give us your thoughts.
I do have my rankings. I have Cam Ward 1, and I'm really interested to see what you guys think about my number 2. I have Jalen Milroe 2.
Yes.
I have Shadur Sanders at 3, Jackson Dart at 4, and actually Will Howard at 5. Because after that, I think after those top 4, which are, to me, the clear consensus top 4, there's a bunch of those mid to late round day 3 guys where you could like a Brady Cook from Missouri or Quinn Ewers from Texas. Will Howard on film was better to me than when I was watching him at Ohio State last season and in the college football playoff.
All right, Dave. So Chris goes Cam Ward, Jalen Milroe out of Alabama, Shadur Sanders, Jackson Dart, and Will Howard. What do you say?
If you're a team that believes that you can fix Jalen Milroe's short area passing ability and his processing overall, that's how it should be ranked. Meaning that he does have the upside to be the second best quarterback in the class. And for fantasy purposes, he might be the best because of what he can do as a runner on top of already a strong arm. I don't know if I want to call him a gifted arm, but there's obviously problems in his game and certainly short area accuracy that slows people down from saying, whoa, he's going to be amazing. But again, if you can fix it and make him better in those areas, then you're going to have a stellar quarterback.
Okay. And your rankings, sir?
He's going to be 4th for me. I've got Ward 1, Dart 2, Sanders 3, Milroe 4.
Who's 5?
Tyler Shuck.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just writing down your answers. You had Sanders 3?
I did.
Okay, so you both had Sanders 3. Jackson Dart 2 for Dave, 4 for Chris. Jamie, if you're doing a mock draft in a dynasty league right now, how would you rank some of the top quarterbacks, just in a super flex dynasty league?
Pre-draft, it would be I go chalk. I'll go Ward, Sanders, Dart, top 3. I actually like Kyle McCord. I think he's going to be an interesting prospect, seeing where he ends up out of Syracuse. But I'd probably go Milroe 4 and then McCord 5.
Okay. Milroe is the exciting 4.40 speed. Unbelievable. His coordinator in Alabama is now Cleveland's offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees. What do you make of the fact that...
Just hosted him for a visit, too.
There you go.
He got invited to the draft, I saw, too. Not that always
Yes.
means that those players will be picked, but that was raising some eyebrows in the draft industry that people thought, oh, hey, this could be a 3rd or 4th rounder, Jalen Milroe, and then he gets invited to the draft.
There's a little bit of controversy about his hand size because you don't want hands smaller than 9 inches. Before the combine, they were smaller, and then after the combine, they were bigger. So that was cool. What do you make of the fact that Jalen Milroe had 16 touchdowns to 11 interceptions and 7 fumbles in 2024? But in 2023, he had 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and 2 fumbles. So took care of the ball really, really well in 2023 and very poorly in 2024.
I can start and segue off what Dave mentioned, that the short area accuracy is not good, like underneath. And I think what he did from just watching both seasons in 24, it felt like he was swinging for the fences way too much. Like I would assume the ADOT was close to the same, if not higher in 24. That I think what he needs to learn beyond just like being coached up on the accuracy and just going through those reps underneath, he needs to learn to get to the check down faster than he did at Alabama in 24. It kind of felt like he thought it was all on him and he had to hit those big plays down the field repeatedly. And if he didn't, the offense was in shambles, when in reality, checking it down or finding the second read underneath probably would have been better. So I think like Jalen Hurts coming out of Alabama and then Oklahoma in 2020, that was what he needed to do as well. And he kind of got that final season of learning how to play within a structured system with Lincoln Riley. That's what Jalen Milroe needs in the NFL.
It's a great comparison, too, because of where he might get drafted.
Mm-hmm.
So
early
if
round 2.
he comes in as a backup somewhere and then just the right situation ends up starting, for our purposes, probably more so than NFL purposes. But hopefully he can turn, his he can, step into the NFL and look a little bit more like a polished passer. Looking at Anthony Richardson, for example, maybe something that the Colts were trying to do when they benched him last year and bringing in some competition this year, as they've said time and time again, he's still far from a polished prospect. But, thrust into the NFL and forced to start because of where they drafted.
I'm going to throw to Chris first on this one. We talked about Shedeur Sanders, whenever you were on, a month and a half ago, whatever it was. And at that point, there was still talk about who's the number one quarterback. Is it him or Ward? Could he be the number one pick? Could he be the number two pick? Where do you have him in your mock drafts right now?
I have him still inside the top 10, although what's interesting is that, and maybe Jamie got some of this info at the owners' meetings, but I know that's all like off the record, that cocktail party. I've just been hearing from the senior or from the combine that like the league, so to speak, in general is a little lower on Shedeur Sanders. I just have continued to mock him inside the top 10 because there are still quarterback needy teams. The Jets, the Saints 7 and 9 respectively would make a lot of sense. Like I said with Dave, like he's my third best quarterback. And later I can give a quick comparison that I have for him. That just came to me recently. But yeah, I just feel like the league as a whole in a vacuum would say, no, this is like a late first round pick, maybe even early second. But the needs at some of those teams at the quarterback spot, even the Steelers at 20, feels like there's no way that he's going to fall out of the first round.
It's definitely the thing that, is generating the most buzz is where will he go? Because I think from what you're hearing, and certainly again, that was a big conversation at the meetings, because basically the Titans were saying, yeah, Ward is one. Like it's it's not, to use Dave's phrase, it's in pencil, but it seems like it's pretty much in pen at this point. I would not be surprised if a team like the Giants, for example, trades back into the first round. I'm not saying that they're going to do that, but somebody that passes on him early gets back into it late if he falls, because of the potential of still what he can be at a position that clearly if you solve it, and you're hopefully good for 10 plus years. To me, the Steelers are kind of the team I circle. If he gets past the Steelers, assuming they sign Aaron Rodgers, but knowing that their quarterback situation is not settled, like that's where I think you start to raise a lot of red flags of why is he continuing to fall, and that's where also I think, you see teams maybe jump back in, starting in the early 20s if he's still, sitting on the board. Because I would still expect him to be the second guy taken. But this is such a weird league. It just takes one team to be enamored with him and to, look at it and say, okay, he's coming mentally pro ready. Forget about the football side of it. He was raised in this, and money is taken care of, so, he's not going to be, thrown off by all this money that's thrown at him. He's going to be able to handle all those things. So he can, for example, like he can handle New York, in my opinion. He can handle that type of a market. So it'll just be interesting to see which team takes a, gamble, if you want to call it that. But could go as high as still 3, and could fall late first round.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder if things have gotten too negative on him. It's like now he's
a lot of that is smokescreen stuff. It's if the Giants really love him, they really love him. Let's just say they'll start talking up Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. They'll start whispering, oh yeah, we don't like him. To especially that market. Yeah, he's not for us, and that just starts to spread like wildfire. So it's an easy thing to sort of look through that and say, again, one team has to be.
Yeah,
the Jets could be in love with him. The Giants could be in love with him. The Steelers could trade up to go get him. It could be, I'm trying to think, like, the Rams, for example, with a 35, 36-year-old Matthew Stafford, could shock the world and say, this is our heir apparent.
Sure.
Anything's possible with this league.
Well, I actually would like to hear the comparison, Chris, that just came to you on Shedeur.
Yeah. Okay. Josh Rosen. So similar in so many ways. Even, you guys were just talking about the off the field, that like the money situation is settled. That was the deal with Josh Rosen. Now, there was a lot, which I never really got any information on, but that like Josh Rosen wasn't super motivated which I don't know if Shedeur Sanders is super motivated, but there's not this, hunger to prove himself to get that generational contract because we know what his family situation is. But for me on the field, Josh Rosen in 2018, in what was a very polarizing and obviously awesome quarterback class was like the least polarizing. Like everyone had him as either like quarterback 2 or 3. They're like, he's good. He looks the part. He's a rhythm passer in the pocket, fundamentally sound. The accuracy is there. He can run a little bit, but he's not a great athlete. And I'm thinking of my old scouting report and just watching those Josh Rosen games at UCLA where you can get lulled to sleep and be like, man, this guy is just a pro-ready pocket passer. I don't want him running that much, but he can do it. All those things I just mentioned. That's kind of how I feel about Shedeur Sanders. That doesn't mean that I think he's going to be out of the league in 2 years and play on 6 different teams and be on a practice squad by his 3rd season. But stylistically, and then you mentioned some of the off-the-field stuff, I think Josh Rosen is like the most apt comparison for Shedeur Sanders in this draft.
Guys, what kind of throws do you care most about? I think we just, you go online and say, watch some Shedeur Sanders highlights. You're going to see some pretty good deep balls. Milroe obviously is great deep ball, great arm. But I hear a lot, like Dan Schneider, for example, you gotta hit the slants, you gotta throw into tight windows, those types of things. So when you're looking at these quarterbacks, what matters to you and which quarterbacks do it well? Dave, I'll start with you.
You have to be able to process first and foremost and know what you're looking at defensively, what type of coverage, both pre-snap and post-snap. You've got to find the open man. Sometimes the open man is going to be in a tight window. Sometimes you have to throw a man open, all right, put the ball in a place where only he can get it and the defender can't. These are all things that matter. The other thing that I love, and I love seeing this, is when a quarterback makes a big play off schedule or improvisationally. It's supposed to be a simple play design where the quarterback's supposed to look at, his X wide receiver, but the X wide receiver is double covered. And now here comes pass rush pressure. Does the quarterback get scared and slide and go into the fetal position? Does he try to make a play? Does he succeed at making that play? And that's where I think Cam Ward is head and shoulders above everybody else in this draft class and above a decent amount of the quarterbacks last year too. He made a ton of improvisational plays and coaches love that. It's one of those things where like you'll see a player do something and you go, no, don't do that. And then the quarterback throws a 40-yard deep ball for a completion or a touchdown or something. And the coaches are like, yeah, that was perfect. That's what you're looking for from a quarterback, a guy who can be a playmaker. We talked a lot about Caleb Williams last year about how he tried to play Superman too much. Well, if a lot of those plays ended up being touchdowns for Chicago, nobody would complain about it. But when a quarterback can do that, when they can make plays off schedule that help a team win, the coaches will love them and fantasy managers will love them too, because that means more fantasy points.
Who's making the NFL throws, Chris, that you want to see in this quarterback class?
Well, I think Dave hit the nail on the head with Cam Ward because it's become a staple of playing the quarterback position at a high level today, those off-structure throws. And Cam Ward certainly did that better than any other quarterback. If we're thinking, if I'm thinking just NFL throws from the pocket, like Dave was mentioning, being able to process, I think seam routes where there's a linebacker underneath the throw and a safety over top of it to have the ability to maybe look off the safety or hold the linebacker for a second and then kind of lift it over the linebacker, but arrive before the safety gets there. That's really important. I thought Jackson Dart did that a lot at Ole Miss. That offense was pretty gimmicky and featured a lot of vertical routes. I think he's got good touch and good accuracy in that area. And then I like to see just from an arm strength perspective, not that it's the old classic, just deep out from the far hash, but those flag routes or those post corners where there's usually a split field safety on that side of the ball or on that side of the field. And do you have enough arm strength? And maybe like Dave was mentioning, the anticipation to throw that before the wide receiver even breaks toward the sideline. You're not leading him inside where the safety can make a play. You're not drifting him to the sideline. And I think for as much as we've kind of dogged Shedeur Sanders, I think Shedeur Sanders has that ability, maybe not with the arm strength, but the anticipation, because he's played so much college football, to realize what coverage it is. All right, this is going to be a good look for this throw, and then ultimately throw it well before his wide receiver makes his break.
Okay. I don't really know what to this is really not a good quarterback class.
No, it's shaky.
It's not.
And unfortunately, a lot of these guys could go the way of the Rosen. Maybe not as fast, but 3 years from now, a lot of these guys could be backups. They could go the way of Trey Lance or Mac Jones, where they get their opportunity. they don't do well with it, and the teams are on to the next quarterback that they find. I think that Ward is just a clear number one. And then I don't know if this is how Chris feels by having Milrow at 2, but I feel like Jackson Dart at 2 for me. He is a lot closer to Shedeur Sanders at 3 than he is to Cam Ward at 1. So if there were tiers, and a tier by himself, and then maybe even nobody in the next tier. I don't know if we've ever done that before. I don't even know if that makes sense. But then the tier after that, that's when you'd see Dart and Sanders for me.
Ward is the only one that would have been drafted pretty close to the first round, if not in the first round of the class last year.
100%. I agree with that.
These other guys wouldn't sniff the first round last year based on how that class was.
Fair.
Yeah, I think the Ward versus Drake May argument is a fun one. I think you look at the last year that they both had in college playing in the same conference. Cam Ward was a Heisman Trophy candidate, and Drake May was not even that good. May's got the size, and then May had a great 2022 season, much better.
But it also goes back to your tight end prospect, versus production question. Like what do they look like and how do they evaluate?
Right, but I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. To me, Ward is better. But if you were going to rank them, Chris, there's no way you can make a case, I think, for Ward ahead of Caleb or Jaden Daniels. But what about Drake May versus Ward?
I still liked May more. I actually wrote this article like a month or two ago, like where Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward would rank among the 6 quarterbacks in the first round last year, and then we were just assuming that Ward and Sanders would be first rounders this year. I believe I had Cam Ward right in the Bo Nix range as like the 5th quarterback out of the 8, and then Shedeur Sanders at 8, like the last one. It all comes down to traits in general. And yes, there's a lot more mental stuff that goes on at quarterback than probably any other position. But somewhere in that J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix, Bo Nix range for Cam Ward. And then again, at, kind of bringing up the rear would be Shedeur Sanders at 8.
So how good is Cam Ward, right? He's going to be probably the first pick in the draft. But is he going to be kind of a bust in that regard? Is he going to be kind of a number 1 overall pick? Because, I do see a lot of lists that rank quarterback prospects over the last 5 years, and he's kind of low on the list. He's just benefiting from being in a really bad quarterback class. So in your opinion, Chris, how good is Cam Ward?
My comparison, it took me a long time with this one because he's so unique. His kind of lack of size, but he can spin it, but the improvisation was there. He reminds me a lot of David Garrard, where you would watch David Garrard and be like, oh, he's not that great of an athlete, but he just made a lot of plays. And he's not hyper accurate, but there were not a lot of stretches there in Jacksonville where he was throwing the ball all over and having wayward misses. He kind of got the most out of every ounce of athleticism and every ounce of talent that he had as a passer during his career. That's kind of how I view Cam Ward, in that the traits in a vacuum are not tremendous, but I love that from Incarnate Word to Washington State to Miami, he ascended. He got better. He improved some of the intricacies of playing the quarterback position. So he is a classic overachiever, and I think he's going to have to be an overachiever to overcome what is still a pretty barren roster early in his career in Tennessee.
He's made a lot of people in Tennessee throw up.
David Garrard.
He was good, right? I mean, that's not like
good.
That's not meant to be a diss. It's just really how I view him stylistically.
When you think you're getting the number 1 overall pick and the best quarterback,
you don't think David Garrard. You're right.
You don't think
right. Who do you think, Dave? What are your thoughts on him as the Miami guy?
Oh, I mean, I've enjoyed watching him play and absolutely think that he's a playmaker. And it wouldn't surprise me. I think about other number 1 quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield and Jared Goff, and they had bumpy moments throughout their career where you stop and think, oh, these guys might be busts. And then they find a way to come back, and they do it differently than Cam Ward. But I think Ward could end up being one of those guys that is a solid NFL starter, not going to get confused with Josh Allen or Mahomes, not going to be a top 5 NFL quarterback. He's not going to be toward the top of any big media lists or anything like that, but still somebody who can serviceably play the position, and maybe even, going to the Pro Bowl isn't a big deal, but earn some All-Pro nods and get some attention, maybe make the playoffs a few years. That's what I think people in Tennessee are hoping for. And as long as that's the expectation and not, he's the next Mahomes, and he's not that, although he does some Mahomesian things. As long as that's the expectation, I think they'll be happy with him.
So a lot like David Garrard, who I just looked up, was a Pro Bowler in 2009. I did not know that previously.
My guess.
How many winning seasons did Garrard have as a starter?
I think a lot, didn't he? I mean, those were some
I don't
pretty
know how many
pesky,
seasons he
good.
had as a starter.
Yeah, I was
Those
going to
are-
say.
Let's see.
Yeah, let's look up. I'm just while you do that, I just want to say I feel like his outcome. I don't think he's the same player, similar, but not going to run as much. But I feel like he'll be kind of as good as Kyler Murray in this area where people don't really know how good Kyler Murray is. He's obviously good. A lot of teams would love to have Kyler Murray, but they're not sure if Kyler Murray could ever win you a Super Bowl or something like that.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I'm not saying that Cam Ward can't get to that heights. He's obviously a winner. You know, he won so many games single-handedly, won 10 games for a team with a dreadful defense. But I just feel like he'll be kind of, QB somewhere 8 to 15 or something in the NFL.
That's fair. Yeah. I just
kinda,
looked it up. Garrard was a full-time starter for 4 seasons, 2 of which ended with a winning record, and he did win that playoff game in Pittsburgh. He started 3 playoff games, or I guess he was a part of the Jags in 05, but wasn't the starter. 2 playoff games, 1 win, 1 loss. So maybe that's like the lower end, and Kyler Murray is the higher end in terms of being in that quarterback 8 to 15 range, where we're not getting too crazy in terms of where we think he can be, but he's not going to be a terrible pro. He actually has a pretty high floor based on where he was just a few years ago.
I just want to bring up one stat before we finish here. Because, completion percentage gets talked about a lot, and Shedeur Sanders led the nation, 74% completion rate. And then there's this criticism. Sorry, there's some weird sound there.
Is that you?
Go away. I have no idea. Anyway, Shedeur Sanders, there's criticism of Sanders that he, just throws short all the time. So I only looked at completion percentage on air yards, 5 to 15 air yards, pass attempts of 5 to 15 air yards. Arbitrary, but everyone's in the same ballpark now. Guess who led the nation in completion percentage? Was Shedeur Sanders, 80.6%, number 1. Jackson Dart was 9th. Dylan Gabriel was 16th, 70.7%. Kyle McCord was 21st. Cam Ward was 26th. Jalen Milroe was 51st at 65.3% completion rate. Tyler Shuck was 56th. Tyler Shuck, people dog on Jalen Milroe for his completion percentage. Tyler Shuck's completion rate was awful. It's like 60.
He's also 27, right?
He's 26, I think. Yeah, he's old.
He was born in 1999.
I wanted to bring up one other quarterback that was not very good, not bad, but not very good in completion rate on pass attempts of 5 to 15 air yards in his last 2 seasons in college. Caleb Williams. I was kind of surprised, and this was a huge problem for him as a rookie in 2024. That was just something that jumped out to me, Jamie. His biggest issue, just his accuracy in intermediate throws, was also kind of an issue in college. It's just kind of interesting. And Jalen Milroe is another guy who struggles with that. So I don't know. You don't have to give a thought on that if you want. You can just say
Hopefully
something.
Ben Johnson fixes it.
There you go. Any final thoughts, guys?
I wouldn't call 5 to 15 air yards intermediate throws.
There's some intermediate in there.
Yeah, toward the 10 to 15. That's intermediate.
I mean, like an 8-yard throw is.
Yeah, but you're lumping in that stat with 15 air yard throws. So
all right, fine. I bet you that. I bet if
Adam would never manipulate stats, not him.
No, I'm taking away 0-yard passes. I'm taking away 2-yard passes. I'm taking away wide receiver screens.
Okay, so why don't you do one where it's like 3 to 8 air yards and then 9 to 15?
It's not going to be that different, but I'll do it right now. You guys talk about whatever you want for the next 30 seconds.
I can throw out 2 more tight ends that Dave, Jamie, I would highly recommend you guys watching. I don't think these guys are going to get picked super early.
Sure.
Aronde Gadsden, who is a former wide receiver at Syracuse.
Just because I covered his dad
It's crazy to get some of these late 90s, early 2000s wide receivers that are now sending kids or players that are now sending their kids to the NFL. Gadsden's interesting because he was like, oh man, he's too slow and too stiff to play wide receiver, but now he's a tight end, bulked up a little. The route running skills are certainly there. He's not crazy explosive, but Rebounding is good. He's kind of a sneaky player that could get picked on day 3, and then teams are just like, hey, we're not going to ask him to block, but he is truly a wide receiver at the tight end spot.
Yeah.
And then Gavin Bartholomew from Pittsburgh is also very fun. He reminded me so much of Jake Ferguson on film, that he is spindly but very athletic, good after the catch. Those two are two of my favorites on day 3, especially just looking through the lens of fantasy upside because of how good they are as receivers.
Okay, Dave, air yards of 9 to 15 air yards pass attempts. Guess who's number 1?
You're going to tell me it's Shedeur?
It is Shedeur.
Okay.
Cam Ward 10th, Jackson Dart 15th, Will Howard 2nd, Milrow 47th, Shook 24th. Interesting. So he was better. He wasn't so good on like 5 to 9 yards, I guess. Caleb Williams, though, the year before, not so good. He was 41st out of 125 quarterbacks. But like Penix was 8th. Cam Ward was 2nd. Who else? McCarthy was 17th. Jaden Daniels was 58th. It was actually worse than Caleb Williams. All right. Thank you very much, Chris Trapasso. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on and letting me rant about some of these day 3 guys that probably won't produce much, but I think it is a very deep class, and it's a lot more than just Tyler Warren. And it was good that I didn't have to come on and defend my stance on being lower on Colston Loveland.
It was very interesting to hear. And we're going to hear you tomorrow when we talk about wide receivers on Fantasy Football Today. For Dave, for Jamie, for Chris, I'm Adam. Have a good one. We'll talk to you tomorrow.